Thank you very much, Pauline. And I am more than conscious that I think I am the 23rd speaker today. I can tell that one or two of you are flagging slightly, but I hope that nonetheless we can move forward in some of these discussions. Because what we've heard is that we are living in an increasingly uncertain and volatile world. If you like, the geopolitical tectonic plates are moving. The traditional world order that we have been familiar with is changing. Now, I say with all goodwill to my US colleagues, this is partly about the USA surrendering its preeminence and the added uncertainty that next year's presidential elections will bring in terms of its stance on climate change, Ukraine, China, the Middle East, and so on. So that's one uncertainty. Secondly, you've got China becoming an increasingly dominant economic power, with its Belt and Road Initiative investing in critical infrastructure in Africa, Asia, Europe, and so on, strengthening economic ties and dependency on China all around the globe. And that's coupled with huge technological investments based, quite frankly, on the theft of intellectual property via cyber means. And what's more, China adopts a 20 or 30-year program to deliver the sort of preeminence globally previously enjoyed by the USA for the last century and arguably Britain in the century before. And then we have Russia, using both hybrid and kinetic means to maximize its influence and restore, or would-be restore, its status as a world power. At the same time, India, Brazil, and a number of other countries are emerging as significant players. And again, I say to my European colleagues, while the future of the European Union becomes less and less certain. And we're in a context where climate change is going to accelerate the process. It's leading to more extreme weather events, both at home and abroad. Floods, droughts, storms, heat waves, and heavy rainfall will become more and more intense and more frequent. This will mean that some parts of the world will become increasingly uninhabitable, driving huge movements of refugees. Possibly, almost certainly, a billion people displaced by 2050. And this is going to lead to shortages of food and water with an impact on global supply chains, and it will produce political instability that will spill over national borders and affect even those of us who will perhaps regard ourselves as many hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. Indeed, the world can expect increased competition for natural resources with greater supply insecurities. And this is not just about grain or energy and fuel, but also the rare earth minerals necessary for modern technologies. And that's why you're seeing the competition for control of mining rights in Africa, why Wagner mercenaries had been encouraged to have free rein there, the swathe of countries that have recently had military coups and so on. And in the Ukraine, the reason why the Donbass area is so hotly contested is because of its mineral wealth, in particular its lithium deposits. And it's not just the kinetic or direct power that matters, but increasingly it is grey zone aggression, and grey zone operations are becoming increasingly important. I've already mentioned the theft of intellectual property. The recent estimate that US companies alone lose between $250 and $500 billion per year, mainly attributed to Chinese actors. And then we have cyber disruption, often unattributable, certainly deniable. Only last week, or the week before, the Polish railway network traffic control system was disrupted. It's attributed to Russian or Belarusian actors. And one of our colleagues was just referring to the threat to Poland. We've just had this week the disruption of UK air traffic control. Now, I am told That this is not a cyber incident. It's something to do with the French. I don't quite understand what the argument is, but it certainly suggests that it is a system which is vulnerable to that sort of intervention. We've had leaks from police databases in the UK. The data from and this is again in the UK, our electoral commission, including the names and addresses and so on, of every person on the electoral register, was recently hacked into. Now, what is this about? It's not about whether or not some Russian operator needs to know my home address. There are other ways of finding that out. It's about undermining public faith in our democratic system and in our abilities for our government to deliver services, whether it's transport services in Poland or transport services in London or police services around the UK. This is about undermining trust in elected government, in its competence, and ultimately about a faith in democracy. And misinformation and disinformation through social media on an industrial scale, which was for a while incidentally subcontracted to the Wagner Group, amplify stories of misinformation and disinformation. They magnify dissent, and again, it is all about undermining trust. So in this country, after Putin poisoned Skripal in Salisbury with Novichok, we had a whole series of strange stuff appearing on social media about how this was clearly nothing to do with Russia. These two Russians had just been visiting the very impressive Salisbury Cathedral, nothing to do with anything else, and that none of this was to do with anything other than that, and it was probably a leak from our weapons research department. We've had all the misinformation and nonsense spread about COVID and vaccinations. We have a whole swathe of material put out to mystify the science about climate change. And we even have stuff about election denial. And when we go into the very critical elections that you will have in the United States, we will have in the United Kingdom, and other countries are having in the course of the next year, we know that those are going to be sullied by deep fake material purporting to show leaders or candidates saying things which they never said or doing things they've never done. We're going to see AI used for precise targeting and content delivered all over the place. Now, this is not necessarily about influencing who wins or who loses. It's about creating a climate in which the public cannot feel confident in their own electoral system. It's insidious. It's deniable. It may be state-sponsored. It may simply be state-condoned. It doesn't really matter. The objective is clear. It's about undermining our system of democracy. It's about playing a long game. Its objective is to weaken the faith in governments and in democracy. Earlier on, Ravi said we should show respect in terms of our international relations. Perhaps it's going to become increasingly important in our own democracies that we show respect internally to each other, including to those we oppose, because the purpose of a lot of the misinformation and disinformation is to widen division, to make it worse, to intensify it, to widen divisions in society. So our task, particularly those who are elected representatives, is not to fall into the traps being set by our adversaries. Those who are politicians should certainly be careful what material they use, avoid the temptation to jump on bandwagons that may turn out to be troll-inspired. But perhaps longer term, we've got to improve the education of our young people to make them critical users of information and media. And then we've got to educate the public more widely to be better prepared. In Sweden, and no doubt somebody from Sweden here, every household has a booklet which says, if crisis or war comes. In Norway, there is the total defense model. This is all about encouraging civic cohesion and preparedness and cohesion rather than division. Ignoring grey zone activity as a means of nation states asserting their power is never an answer. You cannot ignore it. It has to be tackled and confronted. Timidity is not a valid response, and that, frankly, will require political leadership. Thank you.